I gave my daughter my entire life savings to help her start a coffee shop. 1 year later, I was sleeping on their couch when my son minus law kicked my feet and called me a mooch. My daughter watched him throw my belongings out into the yard. But when their business collapsed and I discovered the fraud they committed using my identity, they finally realized they'd messed with the wrong person. Let me tell you how this all went down. I'm 60 - 3 years old, and I worked in a machine shop in Dayton, Ohio for decades. Same place, same job, same calloused hands grinding away day after day. I wasn't rich, but I lived simply. I saved what I could, paid off my old pickup truck, kept a clean one-bedroom apartment. No vacations, no fancy hobbies, just me and my quiet, predictable life. My daughter Elise was my whole world. Her mother died when Elise was only 10, and from that day forward, it was just the two of us against everything. I raised her the best way I knew how. I packed her school lunches, attended every parent-teacher conference, even learned to sew so I could make her Halloween costumes. I did it all because that's what fathers do. She grew up fast, maybe too fast. Moved to Cincinnati for college and met this guy named Kevin at some music festival. He was one of those smooth-talking types, always grinning, always working an angle. My gut told me not to trust him, but I kept my mouth shut. Elise loved him, and her happiness was all that mattered to me. They got married in 2019 with a small backyard wedding. I helped pay for the catering without a single complaint. That's what dads do, right? We support our kids' dreams, even when we have our doubts. Then in early 2021, I got the phone call that would change everything. Elise told me they had this business plan. She'd been laid off from her job, Kevin's hours got cut, and they wanted to open a coffee shop. She'd always loved coffee, she said, and wanted to create this community space with good drinks, live music, poetry readings. It sounded nice enough. They said they had $20,000 saved but needed another $40,000 to make it happen. When she asked me to invest, I was shocked. I asked her why she was calling me about this, and she said she knew I had money saved up. She remembered how I'd always talked about wanting to invest in something real, something meaningful. She offered me a 30% stake as a silent partner and promised to pay me back within 2 years. I didn't say yes right away. I told her I needed time to think about it. But she called again the next day, and the day after that. She was crying, saying they'd already signed the lease and would lose everything if they backed out now. I don't know what made me say yes. Maybe it was guilt, maybe hope, maybe just pure love for my daughter. All I know is that I wired $40,000 from my savings account to Kevin's bank. 40 years of careful saving gone with a single click. They opened the shop in late 2021 in over the Rhine, this trendy little neighborhood in Cincinnati. The place looked professional enough with its clean design, Edison bulbs, and rustic farm tables. I came to the soft opening, expecting to be introduced as one of the investors. Instead, no one introduced me to the staff. Kevin barely acknowledged me. Elise hugged me, but she was already distracted by the chaos of opening day. Kevin was busy laughing with some social media influencer he'd invited. They didn't even offer me a free drink. I should have seen the warning signs right then, but I wanted to believe in them. I wanted to believe my investment mattered. After that day, I barely heard from them. No updates about the business, no discussions about returns, not even a simple thank you. Radio silence. By spring of 2022, my own situation started falling apart. Rent went up at my apartment in Dayton, and my Social Security barely covered the increase. I couldn't keep up with the bills. That's when I swallowed my pride and called Elise. I told her I needed to crash with them for a few weeks while I figured things out. She said it was fine, so I moved in with one duffel bag, a few changes of clothes, and my toolkit. I slept on their living room couch and tried to stay out of their way. I cooked sometimes, cleaned their kitchen, took out the trash, even fixed their broken garbage disposal. I never asked for anything in return. But Kevin didn't want me there. I could feel his resentment growing every day. He'd mutter under his breath when I walked into a room, whisper to Elise when I was around. I'd hear them talking behind their bedroom door at night, and I knew they were discussing me. Then came the night that changed everything. They just returned from some out-down retreat with their barista staff. I was sitting on the couch, watching a Cincinnati Reds game on mute, trying to stay invisible. Kevin walked in, looked at me, and just stared with this cold expression. Then he said, "You've been here for 3 months, Dale. This isn't your house." I was stunned. I sat up and tried to explain that I was actively looking for places to move. He cut me off immediately. "You're not an investor," he said. You're a mooch. You don't pay rent, you don't help the business, you just sit here taking up space. Then, without any warning, he walked over and kicked my feet off the couch. Time to go, he said. I looked at Elise, hoping she'd say something, anything. She just stood behind him, silent and motionless. I said her name quietly, but she wouldn't even look at me. That's when Kevin picked up my bag, my only bag, and threw it onto the front lawn. I just stood there, my knees shaking. I hadn't felt that level of humiliation in my entire life. I walked out without even grabbing my jacket, just wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. It was cold that night, probably in the low 40s. I walked to the bus stop and rode around all night just to stay warm, switching routes until the sun came up. I ended up at a homeless shelter the next morning. No phone calls from them, no apology, nothing. Over the next month, I called an old buddy from the machine shop. He let me sleep in his garage for a few weeks in exchange for fixing up lawnmowers and snowblowers. I saved every penny I could and eventually found a small studio apartment in a rough part of town. But it was mine, and that mattered. Then the news started trickling in. One of Kevin and Elise's employees reached out to me on Facebook. The coffee shop was in serious trouble. They weren't paying employees on time. Customers were complaining about strange smells, and it turned out they had a major leak causing mold behind the counter. Elise was barely showing up to work anymore, while Kevin was spotted partying at bars almost every night. Then the health department shut them down for food safety violations, mold issues, pest problems, and unpaid wages. Their business license got suspended, and the whole operation collapsed. A week later, Elise showed up at my door. She looked terrible, pale and smaller somehow. She told me Kevin had taken their last $6,000 and disappeared. Credit cards were maxed out, bills weren't paid, and she didn't know what to do. I let her talk, but I didn't invite her inside. I stood there holding the door half open while she stood on the concrete step, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Dad, please," she said. "I don't have anywhere else to go." I couldn't speak. My chest felt tight, my jaw locked up. Finally, she whispered, "You were right about him." When I finally found my voice, I said, "You watched him throw me out like I was garbage." She blinked rapidly and said, "I was scared." "No, Elise," I replied. "You were comfortable. You let him do the dirty work, and now that it's your turn to sleep on a couch, you come back to me." She looked down and admitted I messed up. Part of me wanted to slam the door and walk away, but I didn't. I stepped outside and sat down on the top step. She sat next to me, not too close, and we were quiet for a long time. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "I lied to you." I turned and looked at her. "About what?" She rubbed her arms nervously. "Kevin never put in a dime. Not $1. That $20,000 we claimed to have saved, it was money he borrowed from his brother and paid back immediately after we got yours." I felt like I'd been slapped. "So I funded the whole thing?" She nodded. "He convinced me it was safer to call you an investor instead of a lender. He said if we didn't pay you back, legally you couldn't sue us because investors take risks." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So you took my entire life savings knowing you weren't planning to pay it back?" "I thought it would work," she said quickly. "I thought once the business took off we'd be fine. But Kevin started using pills. I didn't know at first, then he got paranoid. He thought you were watching us, spying on us somehow." I stood up because I couldn't sit still anymore. "Why are you telling me all this now?" "Because he's gone, and I have nothing. No home, no car. I had to take a bus just to get here." I went inside and brought her a blanket and a bag of crackers. "I'm not letting you stay," I said firmly. "But you can sit here and rest for a bit." Then, I closed the door behind me. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about what she told me. About the lies, about Kevin's drug use, about how I'd been set up from the very beginning. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail from a collections agency. It was addressed to me, and my hands started shaking as I read it. Apparently, a business loan for the coffee shop had been signed in my name. The balance was over $18,000. I called the number immediately. The representative said my signature was on file. I asked them to send me a copy, and when it arrived, I nearly passed out. It was my signature, but it wasn't mine. It had been traced. Kevin had forged it, and Elise must have given him a copy from one of my old bank forms. I sat down hard on my apartment floor, my back throbbing. I felt physically sick. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was fraud, identity theft, a federal crime. I didn't call Elise right away. Instead, I called a lawyer I knew from my union days. When I told him what happened, He said I needed to file a police report immediately. He warned me that if I waited, it might be harder to prove I wasn't involved. So I did it. I filed the report, gave them the letter, showed them the forged signature. Then I called Elise and told her about the loan and the signature. She cried and claimed she didn't know Kevin had done that. I didn't believe her. I told her I'd file a police report. There was silence on the line, then she whispered, "Am I going to jail?" "I don't know," I said, "but I'm not covering for either of you anymore." 2 weeks later, Kevin was picked up in Kentucky on an outstanding warrant related to drug charges. When they ran his name through the system, my report popped up. They transferred him back to Cincinnati to face additional charges. Elise called me the day after he was arrested. She said the police had come to talk to her, ask questions, and took her phone and laptop. She might be charged too. "I didn't know he forged it, Dad," she said. I didn't reply because part of me still wasn't sure if that was true. And if she really did know, then she had stolen from me twice. Once with my money, and once with my name. I don't care who you are, that kind of betrayal never leaves you. But then another twist came that I didn't see coming. Eamon in a cheap gray suit knocked on my door, showed me a state investigator's badge, and asked if he could come in. He pulled out a folder containing bank transfers, loan documents, and something called a silent equity agreement with my name typed at the bottom and that same traced signature. He told me this was part of a broader investigation. A former employee, one of the unpaid baristas, had filed a whistleblower complaint. She'd found shredded paperwork in the back office, taped it back together, and discovered multiple instances of financial fraud. Kevin hadn't just forged my signature. He'd opened 3 separate credit lines under fake investor names. Mine was one of them. The other 2 were elderly people from his church who had already passed away. This was much bigger than what they'd done to me alone. The investigator asked if I'd be willing to testify. I said yes without hesitation. About a week later, Elise came by again with the lawyer. The lawyer did most of the talking, explaining that Elise was cooperating with the investigation and wanted to make things right. When I asked if she was being charged, the lawyer said it was possible, depending on whether the district attorney believed she knowingly benefited from the fraud. After they left, I found a thick envelope they'd left behind. Inside was a handwritten letter and a cashier's check for $8,000. The letter said Elise had cashed out what remained of her retirement account and started working at a diner downtown. She said she was sorry and knew it wouldn't fix anything. I didn't cry when I saw the check. I didn't feel relief. I just stared at it. $8,000 out of the 40 minus 8,000 I'd lost, and my name was still tied to multiple lines of credit. The trial began that fall in federal court in downtown Sonity. Kevin was being charged with wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, and theft by deception. Elise was charged as a co-minus conspirator on some of the business fraud, but not on the credit card scam that had also been discovered. When I took the stand, I told the complete truth. I explained how I'd given them my entire life savings, how I was promised a stake in the business but given no access, how Kevin had forged my signature on multiple loans, and how they'd thrown me out into the cold with nothing but a single bag. I kept my voice steady as I described that night on the couch, how he kicked my legs and called me a mooch while my daughter watched in silence. The courtroom was completely quiet when I finished. 3 days later, the verdict came in. Kevin was found guilty on every single count and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. The court ordered him to pay over $120,000 in restitution to multiple victims. Elise's case was different. Her lawyer successfully argued that Kevin had manipulated her and that she was unaware of the forged documents. Her cooperation with the investigation helped her case. She pled guilty to a lesser charge of negligent misrepresentation. No prison time, but the judge ordered restitution payments and placed her under supervised probation for 5 years. Her professional licenses were revoked, and she was banned from owning or operating a business. When it was over, Elise found me outside the courthouse. She stood in front of me, her face red and streaked with tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, "but I want you to know I'm sorry." I looked her in the eye. "You didn't speak for me when it counted. You stood there and let that man treat me like garbage." She wiped her face. I was scared. "You were comfortable," I said, "and you stayed comfortable until everything burned down around you." She didn't argue. She just nodded and walked away. 2 months later, I received the first restitution check from the court. It wasn't much, $1,200, but it was something. Instead of just cashing it, I took it to the local newspaper and spoke to a journalist who cared more about facts than fluff. He ran a full piece, front page this time, coffee shop scandal, how a retired machinist lost everything and fought back. The story spread quickly online and on social media. Some local talk shows picked it up. The following week, I got a call from a nonprofit in Dayton that helps older adults who've been financially abused by family members. They asked if I'd be willing to speak at an event, and I said yes. After that event, a man approached me. He owned a chain of auto repair shops across Ohio and had lost his father to a similar situation. He offered me a part-time job in his back office, sorting parts and handling orders. He paid me well and treated me with respect. Over the next year, I slowly rebuilt my savings. I moved into a better apartment, started taking walks again, and even got a little rescue dog named Frankie. She's old and grumpy, but completely loyal. I still think about Elise sometimes. I heard through someone that she's living in a shared apartment, working as a waitress at a bowling alley. I don't hate her, but I don't trust her either. She made her choices, and I made mine. The revenge wasn't loud or violent. It didn't come with fireworks or dramatic confrontations. It came in the quiet way their lives fell apart piece by piece. It came when Kevin realized that charm doesn't work on federal judges. It came when Elise had to sit across from me in that courtroom and see everything I'd built, everything they'd thrown away, come back to confront them. And most importantly, it came when I stood up, told the truth, and walked away with my dignity intact. That's something they couldn't take from me, no matter how hard they tried. Sometimes the best revenge is simply surviving, rebuilding, and proving that you're stronger than the people who try to destroy you.